And today we are joined by Kevin Davis. He's a marketing and brand strategy leader with extensive experience across nonprofit organizations, healthcare, and higher education. He is now serving as the Senior Director of Marketing and Brand Strategy at Erie Family Health Centers. Is that correct, Kevin?
That is correct, yes.
Perfect. And what you're doing is you're leading efforts to strengthen brand visibility, community engagement, and strategic communications for one of the region's largest nonprofit healthcare providers. I'm going to talk a bit more about you. I know it's weird to have somebody say so many things about you, but it's what you've done because over the years, Kevin has built a diverse career across marketing, communications, and external affairs. His experience includes leadership roles at organizations such as City Year Chicago, North Park University, and the University of Illinois at Chicago, where I believe he worked on brand building, enrollment marketing, community engagement, and organizational storytelling. Is that so? Have I missed anything?
Nope, that's correct.
And beyond your professional work, Kevin, you've also been actively involved in the broader marketing community, contributing to leadership initiatives and professional organization that supports growth, mentorship, and diversity within the industry. So, Kevin, I know I've talked a lot, but you have a very long career and we have to talk about it. But before we dive into marketing and brand strategy, we'd love to start with something simple.
Okay.
So, how would you, Kevin, describe yourself beyond your professional role?
Beyond my professional role, I would say that I am a very curious person. I love learning about different things, and I'll say I'm a bit of a nerd too with that, um, and I'm very, very invested in helping other folks reach their full potential. And so that curiosity just kind of blends right into those conversations, and folks pick it up and they want to figure out how can I help them out or something like that. So that's just kind of my whole thing outside of work is just learning and helping other people.
Well, that's wonderful. I guess that's how we all should be like. So, according to everything I just mentioned, you've built a career across nonprofit marketing, comms, and brand strategy.
Mhm.
But we need to understand what first drew you to marketing as a profession.
Mhm. Well, to be honest, I didn't know that marketing was a profession until I was probably in my 20s. I'm a Gen Xer, Zennial, kind of that weird crossover. And back when I went to college, I didn't even know marketing existed. I knew about advertising, but I didn't know about marketing. And it wasn't until I started out as a graphic designer and I'm working with these different clients. And I'm like, where are you putting this? Or what are you doing with this? Or is this a part of a broader plan? And sometimes they said no. And sometimes they said, we need some help. And then I started to learn that that's the marketing, building the different campaigns or the brand strategy around what they were trying to do. And I just soaked up everything that I could learn about it. And I said, you know what? As a designer, I don't like just being told what to do. I want to help with the strategy. And so I started to teach myself some of those marketing skills, reading as much as possible, chatting with folks, and just soaking up as much knowledge as I could. And eventually, I got my first real marketing role wasn't until I was like 32 at University of Illinois at Chicago, starting out as a graphic designer and then translated into a role in marketing.
What was the hardest part about that transition from graphic designer to marketing?
I think the hardest part was finding my voice because as a graphic designer, and this was just me, other people may have a different experience, but for me as a graphic designer, until you get a little bit more senior, people are always just telling you what to do. And so you just get used to just waiting for the work to come to you and then you execute it. But on the marketing side, you have to think about this is where we're trying to go as an organization. These are the plans, this is what the timeline looks like. And then here's the creative piece. And so scoping out all the work, when does it need to be done? Who's going to do what? And making it clear to those who were more senior to me or in leadership positions that I was the expert in that space where there was no one above me that had that experience. And so that took a little while uh, to get around being kind of shy or just didn't know what to do.
You basically went from following a task to creating the task.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, and you're now leading marketing and brand strategy at the Erie Family Health Centers.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct, right?
Yep.
So, what excites you most about the work you're doing there today?
Well, I can answer that a couple ways. Most currently, we just opened a new location, which is our 14th location, and we haven't built a ground up location in a very long time. And so we're part of the Sankofa Village Wellness Center, which is a collaboration of Erie Family Health Centers, the YMCA, Rush University Medical Center here in Chicago, Equal Hope. There's a few different partners, and that project was to decrease the life expectancy gap between folks who live in the West Garfield Park neighborhood of Chicago versus the downtown communities. And so, talking about that project for 4 years to this point, going from email to community meetings to groundbreaking, and now we just opened up the facility back in February. That was a very exciting process to go from idea all the way to conception into execution. But I will say beyond that, what's exciting for me right now is I get to kind of dabble in marketing, but then also the organizational culture side of things. And so that's my passion outside of marketing. Is the marketing says this about the organization on the outside, but internally, do we all feel that? And how do we operate internally as an organization so that the brand just bleeds out with authenticity? And so I have the pleasure of sitting at the intersection of organizational brand and organizational culture. So I don't get bored at all, but it's good to have a line of sight internally to these traditionally very opposite and different worlds where someone like me wouldn't be involved, but that's kind of a path that I've created for myself and they allow me to do it.
And then you get to help people. So, you're probably
Absolutely.
on cloud nine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, a large part of your career has focused on mission driven organizations.
Yes.
How does marketing change when the goal it's not just profit, but real community impact? That's a whole different kind of marketing.
Yeah. And I think that what draws me to this work is that it's not about profit because then you kind of get there by any means necessary. And in the line of work that I've been a part of, that's not the case. And so where the goal is not the profit of the organization, we're dealing with folks' lives. And so thinking back to education at the university, how can we expand access to the different communities so that folks can go to college? And then when I left and went to City Year, that was K through 12. And so that whole organization was focused on keeping students on track so they graduate on time. And so again, it was expanding access because one of the greatest indicators of failure in school is if you're off track by third grade. So being a part of an organization that specialized in those interventions to help students get on track, to talk to their families, to talk about these are the things that are important. That meant a lot to me every day, knowing that the organization that I'm a part of is helping improve the educational outcomes of kids who otherwise would drop out of school, be victims of crime. And so there was a natural progression going to Erie, where at City Year, we learned about the social determinants of health. And one of those is the healthcare. And so if your healthcare is not on point, you may miss school, you're at school feeling a different way. And so it became a bit of a kind of a throughput. So moving over to Erie and helping patients and expanding access for them and making sure that folks have quality health care regardless of their ability to pay was huge to me. And so that's what drives me each day in my work, knowing that it's not about a profit for someone, but it's about expanding access. And in this case at Erie, it's about expanding access for healthcare for communities that other folks don't want to cater to because it's not as profitable for them. But for us, it's our mission to make sure that we're connecting high quality care with patients who need it most, regardless of their ability to pay.
You know that throughout the episodes, I've asked about brand trust to almost every single one of our guests. But it is a whole different thing to talk about brand trust with a brand that is looking to make profit.
Yeah.
And in sectors like healthcare and nonprofit. So, from your experience, how important is brand trust in these kinds of sectors?
Brand trust is very important in the nonprofit sector overall is very important because you hear about some of these cases where there's been embezzlement of funds or where there's a rule of about for every dollar, the organization should put 80 cents of that back into the organization. And so you may hear about organizations not doing that, where only 10 or 15% is making it back into the organization. And so in general, with nonprofits, trust is very, very important because folks want to make sure that the money that they're giving to you or donating to you, it's going to be used properly. And specifically in healthcare, it's a lot. Trust is huge. And speaking about our recent project that I just mentioned, we were moving into a predominantly Black neighborhood and had experienced decades of disinvestment. And so when we started to reach out to members of the community, they were very skeptical because they've had other organizations try to come in and not deliver on their promises. But then there's also a huge distrust of healthcare professionals for the Black community in general, because there are too many times where Black patients are underdiagnosed, they're not treated with respect, or they're over medicated. And so we had to come in and spend years building trust, which meant showing up at all of these different meetings, which meant listening, getting yelled at about different things that are going on, reiterating that project is for them. It is so huge. But for me and my team, that's easy because that's who we are. We're an authentic team and we make sure that what we're saying is accurate and we lead with that transparency. And so being at Erie, it makes it very easy to be transparent, but in the nonprofit sector, trust is super, super important on so many levels because you only have that one opportunity to get it right. And once you've misused that trust, folks are not going to come back and they're going to tell their friends and family not to trust you.
I'm listening to you, and it's very hard for me to understand how it is that we're in 2026
Hmm.
and we still have those issues
Yeah.
going. It's unbelievable.
Hmm.
I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, when you're going to give your money to a nonprofit, you want to make sure that, I mean, you think about it like 4 times. So yeah, trust is a big issue. You've worked across healthcare, education, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. How have these different sectors shaped your perspective on marketing and on comms?
In working in nonprofits, and the nonprofit I lump higher education is a nonprofit. So I lump that in there. In the nonprofit space, it has really driven home the importance of trust and authenticity because you're trying to expand access for whatever it is, either educational opportunities or healthcare. And every single interaction needs to be scoped out. It needs to be vetted, such as the case at Erie. We make sure that all of our communications are at least at a fifth grade reading level to appeal to all patients. And then we test those messages out. I think maybe sometimes maybe a little bit more than some of our for-profit counterparts because we don't have the benefit of the doubt of some of the larger hospital group names or universities. But it really has made me think about the trust aspect. But then also the other challenge is the team dynamic. In nonprofit and higher education, you typically do not have the same size teams as you would for a for-profit entity or a larger institution. And so it's really made me focus more on developing my communications team and giving them the skills to be leaders so that I can't do everything. I want you to go out and feel like you have the autonomy and feel empowered to lead either in comms or digital content or the creative space. And so it has made me operate a little bit differently as the leader of the group because I have to train them, remove all these different barriers, and then keep their development top of mind because we may not have the compensation that some of the organizations may have. So it makes me have to think about how to make adjustments to still deliver a high quality product while knowing that the stakes are a little bit different. So it's a little bit like an algebraic equation. You're always solving for something else on the other side of the equation, but I think that's what makes it fun for me and ensuring that I'm bringing a high quality and professional perspective to the nonprofit space where sometimes folks don't expect that.
But whether it's nonprofit or for profit, marketing leaders need to balance storytelling
Yes.
with measurable results.
Yeah.
That it's, I mean, whether or not it's nonprofit. How do you personally approach that balance?
Oh man, that's an ongoing that's an ongoing kind of battle, and it ebbs and flows. But I think that as marketing leaders, a part of our job is to communicate with our those that are above us, different leadership teams, so that they understand that not every single interaction or engagement point may have a metric associated with it. And consumers' behaviors have shifted. So they want to see more storytelling. They want to know how your product or service empowers them to live their best life. And so that took a little bit of a shift over a few years in my current role to get folks to understand that, because it had been more traditional transactional marketing, this, that, this, that. And I'm like, no, we need to tell our story a little bit more, but we have to learn how to decenter our organization and focus more on, in this case, the patients. And so it's a balance, and you got to kind of look at the cyclical flow of your organization on where you need support the most and kind of fill it in with some of those content gaps. So when you do have something you need to issue a call to action on, or something that's a little bit more transactional, they've seen the story develop over the past year. So they built trust with you. So when you say, come here for your care, or bring your dollars here to support what we're doing, that they trust because they've seen the story build. So someone is a little bit pushing back and managing up, but then telling your team, this is why we need to be able to ebb and flow and be agile in the process.
We've been talking a lot about trust, and I think this has to do a lot with trust because you've also been involved in leadership and professional community. So now that we're talking about trust and people, how important is mentorship in the marketing industry today?
I think mentoring is very important because marketing is so broad. It's so vast, and it's easy to find yourself in a silo within your organization where you're
Mhm.
only thinking this way. You're only thinking, in this case, the Erie way, but the Erie way is not the only way. And if I don't learn how to think a little bit bigger, we'll never grow as an organization. And so I think that having a mentor is super important because it allows you to speak to someone who's a little bit more of a seasoned vantage point that can tell you about some things that are beyond your scope. But I think they can also help you map out your career and figure out how to position yourself for advancement or for growth, or when to realize that you may need to go to another organization. On the flip side, I think that it's also important to be a mentor in an organization. And that's something that my father, he instilled in me. And so now I'm a mentor through the American Marketing Association. I mentor at the University of Illinois. I mentor as much as possible while also seeking mentors. So I'm always in a state of learning and growth, but helping others so they don't experience the same challenges that I did coming up in my professional career.
Well, on that note, you've been doing this for a very long time, and marketing in the past, I would say 4 or 5 years, is evolving very rapidly with tech and digital platforms. So, what are some shifts that organizations should be paying attention to right now?
So while not necessarily a platform, there is a shift or blurring of the line between internal and external communications. And and it causes organizations to function more as a bit of a integrated marketing and communications team. And if you look, more universities are moving to that model where they're teaching IMC. And so you're learning the holistic approach, which is your marketing, communications, content, and digital strategy. And so you have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, a little bit, at least to understand at a basic proficiency of what's happening, and teach your team to not think just in their silo, because at any given point, you may need to move some levers and have them do something else, or pitch in for someone else. I think also the ubiquitous AI. It's so generic, and we hear everyone talking about it. I'm at conferences all the time, and it's AI, AI, AI all over the place. And I think that organizations need to figure out what will their approach be, even at the most basic level. There are opportunities, particularly for communications teams. If you use a generative AI platform, you may be able to to develop your own library of content. So when people search within the organization, I want to talk about our advocacy on Medicare, and it'll pull from your existing library so that you don't have to, everyone has to always put together a new deck. That's a basic level. I think also in regards regarding AI, it is, looking at what can be automated. And that's something that my team's exploring now, so that we don't have to focus on some of the mundane tasks. We can kind of schedule those things and focus more on a strategic approach. The last thing, I think, the last shift is you're seeing more folks tuning out of content for the sake of content. They're looking for meaningful interactions. And so some people are finding that on TikTok. Some people are finding that on LinkedIn, but it's real authentic engagement points and not just pumping out content to say we put these things out there.
Wow. Um, Looking back at your very interesting career, what experiences would you say have shaped your leadership philosophy the most?
Number one, terrible leadership. Terrible leadership is why I am the person that I am today, because I remember how I felt uh, when I was not in leadership, and I wanted to make sure that no one else should feel that way. And so, how can I be a partner to folks on my team versus feeling like a dictator, or not feeling like someone has invested in me, or someone's not invested in my growth? They're not finding opportunities for me. That is the number one thing that has shaped my leadership kind of mandate. And then I would say second to that would be having great supervisors that let me explore and play around. And so say, hey, Kevin, we need you to do A and B this year. Now, whatever you do outside of that, we're okay. So I get to play around with C, D, E, F, G, all the way down, and get to experiment and then come back and say, this is what we did this year. I would love to expand that and move that forward. So now I've been able to build some business cases to advocate for either more funds or more opportunities to do different things. And so, um, but just having those supervisors that let me explore and experiment, then it kind of leads to my next point, being able to fail gracefully. There was I had a huge misconception that leadership equaled perfection. And that was just based on how previous supervisors, man, you make a mistake and they're on top of you and you're like, okay, well, maybe when I get to your level, there it must be perfection. And then you get to that level and you realize it is not perfection and people fail all the time. The difference is when you fail, what are you learning from this? What would you do differently if the conditions changed? Did you notice them? And so it's what did you learn from the failure? And folks are like, okay, that's fine. As long as you weren't neglectful or just purely negligent, you're allowed to fail, but let folks know ahead of time that it's looking like I may fail instead of telling them at the last minute. So I think those three are like the 3 points that have kind of shaped who I am today.
Since you were talking about failure, I think there's something very interesting that we should discuss with you.
Mhm.
And it's that some organizations are often saying that their marketing is not delivering results, period. Is the marketing really not delivering results, or is it the way they perceive the situation? Should they start fixing things? Where should they start fixing things?
Yeah. I think sometimes it is that the marketing is not yielding a result, but it's also at times it's their perception. And before you get into fixing anything, you have to reestablish what is the baseline. And when you think about an organization, there's a lot of transition, people leave, people come, people get promoted, and everyone has a different understanding of what success looks like, or everyone knows marketing, right? And so sometimes you need to have a level setting conversation to say, what does success look like? And then we can all kind of put it out there. And then as a marketing leader, you can say, okay, this is what you all said, but that's not the case anymore. The landscape has shifted. The tools are different. Metrics don't mean the same thing. We need to figure out what really matters at an organization. And that's something that I've had to do, even in my current role, was to say marketing doesn't exist just for transactional opportunities. So there may be something, I'll give you an example. There may be an example where you may need more customers or you may need more patients. And folks will come to marketing to say, We need more patients. Go put a campaign together. And I'm going to say, okay, but that campaign's probably going to take about 60 days to get off the ground because we need to meet, figure out what's happening, get budgets, creative strategy. And then it might be another 30 to 60 days before you see any results because we got to let it get out there. And so my question to them will then be, is the downturn that we're seeing now, is that cyclical? Because if it's
Mhm.
cyclical, by the time we get this back up and running, it will have righted itself anyway. And so you say, well, if it's going to right itself in the spring, we don't need to touch it, but we can shift our tactics and say to the sales team, you already have a database of prospects. Let's focus on the communication to those entities that are already in our system versus a campaign for me that's going to send it out to just anyone. And so some of it is kind of pushing back and coaching through and say, we can do both if the timing makes sense, but let's plan better for next year. So if the forecasted downturn is coming, we can start our campaign earlier. So when the downturn hits, we're already ahead of it. So sometimes it is broken, but sometimes we're operating under old assumptions of what it looks like.
Mm.
And sometimes you need to say, you know what, this is a year of brand awareness, which
Mhm.
means we have to just put some money out and spend time and efforts on publicity in order to build trust and goodwill within the community or the markets you're trying to penetrate. And then we can say, let's look at some of the numbers. How many people came to the website? How many people filled out the form? We can do that. We may have to shift what success looks like.
I love your approach on this. So I'm going to ask you something. I'm going to make you think a lot, I think. If you had to build a brand from scratch today and with a very limited budget, what would be the first three things that you would focus on?
I would say the first thing I focus on is really the purpose of it, or what problem are we really solving? Really spend a lot of time there. And number two would be, what is the end user experience? That's what matters now. Consumers, they don't care about marketing campaigns. They want to know, what is the experience like when I go to your website or I go to your location or I open the package? What does that feel like? Like, you have to think through all of those types of things, because then it makes it feel a little bit aspirational because you have
Mm.
this great experience and it's this thing that you absolutely need. And I would say investing in the feedback loops. And so listening to, social chatter, what's happening with the brand, how are folks interacting with the brand, and then us turning around and responding. We heard you. You all said you wanted a different button on here or you would like earlier hours. We heard you. We listened. And in my experience, that part goes a long way. Letting people know that we heard you and the change is happening because of what you told us. So now they know when we speak, Kevin's brand listens and they will respond and they'll follow up with some sort of action. So I would say for me, it's really about the experience more than campaigns, anything like that. It's, how do you feel when you interact with this brand and does it meet your needs?
I love that. And one of the things that's happening today is that everyone wants to do personal branding.
Yeah,
So, in every industry. So, from your perspective, how important is personal branding for marketers and leaders today?
absolutely important. So much so that, so I have a business outside of work. It's called Kevin Davis Brand. And bef- before I moved to Chicago about 17 years ago, I had another company and I did marketing and design. And then when I moved here, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should switch the name. And so it became Kevin Davis Brand, so that you always associated Kevin Davis with marketing and branding. And so I took the basic marketing approaches to my career. And since then, I lecture about that. I'm a guest speaker on that topic of, how do you treat yourself like the product or the brand? Because you have to. There's tons of competitors out there. You need to figure out how are you positioning yourself in the marketplace? How are you presenting yourself? What is your unique value proposition? You know, what is the one thing, if I lined 10 podcast hosts up against each other, what is your one thing that you know that you can do that the others don't? And a lot of times people don't have an answer for that. They never thought about it because they just feel like we're all competitors. And so once you think about what is your secret sauce or that one thing that makes you, it gives you a bit of like a superpower, That's your value proposition. And then from there, you start to make sure that everything you do is in service of your value proposition, which should align with your goals. And so when you develop that throughput, it makes things so much simpler. And then you start to understand why no one's calling you for job interviews, why no one's promoting you at work, no one's calling you to speak at different panels or whatever it is you're trying to do is because you haven't done the work to simplify who you are and what you offer. And so I think that everyone should spend some time focusing on their personal brand. It's a bit of like an iceberg. Folks think it's just your resume. They think that it might be your LinkedIn, but all the things beneath are going to be working on your soft skills, your executive presence, thinking about your value proposition, your leadership mandate, all of those soft skill things are what help define your brand. And then at the end of the day, they're all in service of whatever it is you're trying to achieve in life. So I think everybody should spend some time there.
Listening to you, I have to tell you that it's sort of like a full circle situation because it comes down to trust. If
Yes,
you market yourself and your personal branding is working, you're going to be trustworthy.
absolutely. When you don't spend time defining who you are and what you offer, folks don't trust you, and they don't feel like they feel like you're all over the place. And I want someone I can trust to do A or B or whatever that is. If you're all over the place, I don't feel like you're really in it to do A or B. I feel like you're just doing whatever. And I get it. Folks have to pay the bills. But on the flip side, you got to understand why folks don't trust you because you don't have that level of specificity with your personal brand.
I cannot believe that we've been talking for over a half hour. So I'm going to wrap it up because I mean, it's crazy. I think we started like 5 minutes ago. But I'm going to ask you finally if you could give one piece of advice to marketers who are building their careers today. What would that piece of advice be?
I always have this answer for this. My advice is to focus on people and strategy. You're always dealing with people. You're always trying to influence people. You always need to understand people. And as a marketer, a lot of what we do is strategy, but folks focus just on the tactical pieces. So if you focus on learning people, learning strategy, I feel like you can kind of write your own ticket, but it takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of patience, and it takes a level of understanding. You might not always be right, and you got to listen to other people and sometimes put their needs before you. So people and strategy, you'll go far.
Kevin, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I know many people are going to want to talk to you. So where can they find you?
Go to my website, kevindavisbrand.com, and then I'm on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Kevin Davis.
Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me.